Today's meeting is yet another case of déjà vu. The performance of this cheap, second-rate spectacle is being carried out at the Security Council by the Ukrainian and European delegations on a monthly basis. And the reasons are very clear to us. First and foremost, they cannot allow for the international community's attention to be shifted to other crises. And second, the need to conceal the panic prevailing within their own ranks. And booing their own spirits is not unwelcome either. Zelenskyy is perfectly aware of the fact that the definitive sidelining of the Ukrainian file in international politics, owing to escalation in the Middle East, is significantly reducing the profits reaped from his tours around European states. Apparently, he thought that he would be able to endlessly and effortlessly solicit cash from his Western sponsors, intimidating them with the idea that the UAF is the only barrier to Russia's march on Europe. Having understood that the U.S.-Israeli aggression against Iran and the grave ramifications of this crisis have reshuffled his card deck, Zelenskyy did not lose his bearings, and he redoubled his zealous attempts to promote Ukrainian armed forces battlefield experience. He did not shy away from crediting himself with imaginary achievements in security for Persian Gulf states. And in his words, I quote, "Their protection required urgent expertise, urgent response. We provided for this. The Ukrainian expertise worked. Everybody has recognized that. And the same is needed in Europe. Our diplomats have the corresponding requests from Asian countries, and I instructed that this be acted upon promptly. Ukrainian military personnel are participating in consultations about how the Strait of Hormuz will continue to operate." End of quote. In this alternate reality, in case you were unaware, the Kyiv regime is has single-handedly unblocked the Strait of Hormuz, exporting security throughout the world, and practically has won victory over the Russian Federation. This is nothing more than the fruit of the fantasy of the thieving head of the Ukrainian regime, which he is trying to sell to anybody who is willing to pay. First and foremost, to the current European leaders who are terminally afflicted by Russophobia, unable to adopt decisive, responsible decisions, if we can even call these people leaders, and who continue to froth at the mouth as they vociferate about the resolve to continue to support Ukraine as long as necessary. However, the situation in Ukraine is dire. Ordinary Ukrainian people are refusing to fight for the blatantly corrupt leadership of the country. They are dodging the draft, they are deserting, and they are clearly rebuffing the military consignment efforts. The people those rounding up people at recruitment centers, and the radical Nazi affiliates who essentially are abducting people in order to offset the mounting losses incurred by the Ukrainian armed forces. The hunt targeting Ukrainian men is taking place in broad daylight. They are being dragged from their apartments, from their homes, from public-private transport, from hospital cots, from their workplaces. The kidnappers are even lying in wait in pharmacies and grocery stores. People are being maimed. They're being beaten nearly to death. Tear gas is being used against them, electroshocks, and even persons with disabilities and persons with serious diseases are being rounded up. This is the kind of so-called security that Zelenskyy is looking to export throughout the world. In reality, he is merely exporting mercenaries and weaponry, which are surfacing in conflict hotspots throughout the world. And of course, his theatrical productions largely being exported to European stages. Nor can we fail to comment on allegations against the Russian Federation alleging violations of the Russian president's announced Easter truce. We hope that this measure did indeed allow for the vast majority of Orthodox worshippers to peacefully celebrate the holy day. Kyiv, of course, immediately began to hurl allegations against Russia, alleging ceasefire violations. However, the Russian side verified at least 6,500 ceasefire violations by the Ukrainian armed forces. And this was merely in the 32 hours of its being in effect. And the UAF also shelled civilian objects, and there are dead and wounded civilians as a result as well. I emphasize that this measure can under no circumstances be interpreted as a prologue for a long-standing ceasefire. Russia advocates for achievement of a long-term, comprehensive resolution in such a manner as to eradicate all of the root causes of the conflict. There can be, and there must be no substitutions, palliatives, or misconceptions here. And Zelenskyy and the majority of European leaders are striving not to attain peace, but rather to prolong the war, and this is the main reason for which the Ukrainian crisis remains unresolved to this day. And even though European delegations today on camera are shedding crocodile tears about the myriad woes and travails besetting the Ukrainian people, in reality, the Ukrainians' plight is of no concern to them whatsoever. Late last week, the Chief of Defense of the Belgian Armed Forces, Frederick Van Sina, in an interview stated that Ukraine is gaining time in order to prepare European countries for war with Russia. And this is precisely what Kyiv is being paid money for and receiving credit for. Ordinary Ukrainians are expendable, and this is essentially what the Belgian general stated. However, there are fewer and fewer of them too, and it is increasingly difficult to round them up. Therefore, the Europeans are considering and studying measures to bring back refugees, first and foremost male refugees, to Ukraine. There are large-scale weapons production initiatives underway in Europe. No effort is being spared for the Kyiv regime to hang on another year and a half to 2 years, but a respite would also be welcome in order to replenish their forces, and this is precisely what they mean when they talk about ceasefire. There is no sensible political force in Kyiv that can counter this cannibalistic design, and the current Ukrainian leaders continue to blindly do his bidding. Not only is this guaranteeing that he stays in power, but also guarantees his personal enrichment. And yet the conclusion of this script, drafted by the collective West, will be exceedingly tragic. Thank you.
Distinguished members of the Security Council, I wish to thank the Presidency of Bahrain for convening this meeting and express my gratitude to the delegates of Denmark, France, Greece, Latvia, Liberia, and the UK for supporting Ukraine's request. I further thank the distinguished briefers, Assistant Secretary General Mohammed Khaled Kyari and Assistant Secretary General Joyce Msuya for their sobering presentations and testimonies. Once again, in this chamber we have heard shocking and unbearable facts of Russia's systematic war crimes and crimes against humanity perpetrated against the civilian population in Ukraine. All this evidence, so meticulously documented by the UN mission, will, I'm convinced, become a key foundation for future judicial proceedings and the prosecution of all perpetrators of these outrageous crimes. And the moment of accountability will come much sooner than many expect. Regarding the alleged civil victims that the Russian authorities have claimed, I have to stress that these data could not be duly verified by the independent UN bodies. Ukraine does not attack civilians. Mr. President, more than 1,500 days have passed since the beginning of the Russian Federation's full-scale military invasion in Ukraine. The Russian armed forces have continued to deliberately and systematically attack the civilian population of Ukraine and target critical civilian infrastructure using ballistic and cruise missiles, guided aerial bombs, multiple launch rocket systems, and deadly Shahed drones, resulting in significant casualties and destruction. Russian drones hunt civilians like in a vicious video game. They strike ambulances, they hit emergency personnel and firefighters, they hit OCHA staff, as we just heard from the briefing of ASG Msuya. Just between March 30 and April 13, Russia launched over 3,600 strike UAVs, nearly 1,350 guided bombs, and more than 40 missiles against Ukraine, killing at least 70 civilians and injuring more than 400 people. And last week brought no relief from the Russian terror. Moscow used over 2,360 strike UAVs, more than 1,320 guided bombs, and nearly 60 missiles against Ukraine, killing and injuring dozens of innocent people. On April the 14th, a Russian strike on the center of the city of Dnipro claimed the lives of 5 civilians and left 27 others injured. On the night of April 15, Russia carried on one of the deadliest attacks against civilians using more than 700 ballistic and cruise missiles and drones. Kyiv, Odesa, Kharkiv, Dnipro, Zaporizhia, Kherson regions came under massive attack. At least 17 civilians were killed and dozens wounded. Among those killed in the capital was a 12-year-old boy. I could continue this vast catalogue of new Russian war crimes, but regrettably, for some in this chamber, these horrific facts have been reduced to little more than routine wartime statistics and do not evoke the harsh reaction necessary to put Russia in its place. This indifference must end. Mr. President, before I proceed with my statement, I wish to once again briefly debunk the baseless accusations and propaganda that we heard last time and today from the mouths of Russia's representative. To be frank, it is not easy for any person guided by common sense to provide a rational response to these Russian flows of distorted narratives and fabrications. Ignorance in this regard might seem the most natural response to the constant stream of lies that Russia has been spreading in this chamber, also today. But this stance has created the illusion that what the Russian delegation says may have some factual basis, which is completely wrong. So let me expose at least some of the groundless claims that we just heard in Mr. Nebenzya's statement. The delegate of Russia expressed concern that the president of Ukraine is allegedly too worried about the international community's attention shifting to the Middle East and therefore is actively engaging with the countries of the Gulf region. In reality, this assertion reveals something else, namely Russia's complete loss of credibility and growing irrelevance in this region. The truth is that it is Ukraine that is extending a hand of practical assistance to its partners in the Gulf, helping them protect their energy infrastructure from criminal strikes by Iranian drones and missiles supported by Russia. And it is Russia which is the main accomplice of the Tehran regime that has betrayed the Gulf countries, delivered them a knife in the back, and abused its veto right to block a crucial draft resolution on freedom of navigation in the Strait of Hormuz 2 weeks ago. Mr. President, the Russian delegate once again lamented today the alleged difficulties of mobilization in Ukraine, repeating a familiar repertoire of lies. Instead of spreading disinformation about the Ukrainian army aimed at driving a wedge and sowing a division in our society, perhaps Mr. Nebenzya should reflect on the alarming reality inside Russia's armed forces. Since the beginning of this year, Russia has been losing no fewer than 30 to 35,000 soldiers every single month. In fact, Russian battlefield losses have exceeded monthly recruitment plans achieved through contract enlistment. This reveals a growing structural crisis of Russia's manpower system. The Kremlin is increasingly struggling to attract volunteers for its vicious war of aggression despite unprecedented financial incentives. Russian regional authorities are engaged in an unsustainable bidding contest, offering ever higher signing bonuses that far exceed average incomes. Recruitment relies on coercion, pressure on vulnerable social groups, prisoners, migrant workers, recently naturalized citizens, and foreign mercenaries. Newly recruited personnel are sent directly into the high attrition assaults without adequate training. Given the casualty rise, which are unprecedented, recruits from whom Mr. Putin is sending into the meat grinder on Ukrainian soil face an extremely short life expectancy, measured in weeks or even in days. So before lecturing others, Russia should confront the uncomfortable truth. It is not Ukraine that faces a mobilization crisis. We fight for our homeland. It is Russia that is burning through its own population. Mr. President, in my previous statement, I presented clear evidence of why Russia is going to lose this war because of its disastrous economic situation. Today I will demonstrate why Mr. Putin will fail and be defeated from the military point of view. No army since World War I has paid such an astronomical death toll for such negligible gains as Russia. According to battlefield assessments, Russia is currently losing on average 254 soldiers for every square kilometer of Ukrainian territory it still manages to occupy. To put this into historical perspective, let me remind that during the Winter War of 1939-40, an illegal aggression that was launched by the Soviet Union against Finland, the cost of human lives per square kilometer was roughly 100 times lower. This comparison illustrates a fundamental reality of this war. Russia is achieving minimal territorial gain at an extraordinary high human price. At present, Russia does not control more than 20% of the Donetsk region, territory which Mr. Putin has been demanding in the form of an ultimatum that Ukraine surrender without a fight. This is pure blackmail. We are speaking about 6,000 square kilometers. Russia demands Ukraine to abandon one of the most heavily fortified and logistically developed defensive lines. And we must not forget, first and foremost, that beyond these fortifications, there are cities and villages where Ukrainians live. How can we leave hundreds of thousands of these people to their fate to face barbarians bringing death and destruction? Taking into account the current staggering and appalling rate of Russian losses for every square kilometer of Ukrainian soil, the bloody arithmetic becomes even clearer. The calculation is very simple. Just multiply 6,000 by 254 dead soldiers for each square kilometer. According to this brutal logic of war, in order to seize the whole territory of Donbass, of the Donetsk region, by military means, Mr. Putin would have to send at least another 1.5 million soldiers to their deaths. This mathematics is truly mind-boggling. In practical terms, this would effectively amount to more than doubling Russia's current human losses in this war, bringing the total beyond 3 million casualties. Even for Mr. Putin, for whom the value that he attaches to the life of his own citizens appears to be worth less than a penny or a ruble, such a figure would be catastrophic. That is why the Kremlin turned to the pseudo-negotiation tactics, trying to achieve this goal through diplomatic pressure on Ukraine. But it is not going to work. If one were to apply the current rate of Russian casualties to Mr. Putin's real objective, which is occupying the entire territory of Ukraine,